In this video, I'm going to be going through creating a VM. In my last video, I took a look at networking and how all that's set up and how it works. Not only am I going to be discussing VMs, but I'm actually going to go ahead and create a VM with my Azure student account. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our usual, and we're going to just put a nice label of VMs up here. So VMs are infrastructure as a service solutions and are the building blocks of services. To recap, there's your platform as a service, or your PaaS solutions, your IaaS solutions, infrastructure as a service, and your SaaS solutions, software as a service. So your software is going to be your things like Microsoft 365, Microsoft Teams, etc. IaaS solutions are going to be your things such as VMs, and platform as a service are going to be you're not messing with the underlying infrastructure that's provided for you, but you can deploy things on top of it. So, with a VM, you have access to everything like you would if you were on-premise. You have administrative access to everything on the VM. This is going to be our VM for this example. And so this is going to be pretty close to what you'd be used to with an on-prem virtual machine. And to understand a little more about the virtual machines, you need to understand what you're responsible for and what Azure is responsible for. So Azure is responsible for the hypervisor, the compute, the network, and storage, and kind of maintaining the infrastructure of that. You're responsible for things such as the data, applications, middleware, runtime, OS, etc. You have to patch back things up, configure things, replicate things, install your antiviruses, your anti-malware, etc. So Azure is taking care of a lot of your infrastructure while you're responsible for all of the next level type things. So you don't physically have to take care of a server, but you do have to take care of things like data, applications, OS, etc. And depending on your workload, you're going to have different resource requirements. And there are different kinds of VMs to help meet those requirements. So this is a VM, however, there's a bunch of different types of VMs. Got ahead of myself there. So on a VM, you'd have CPU, your storage, your bandwidth, that's definitely not spelled right, network, and there's a bunch of different other things that you have to take into account, any kind of specialization type things that you're going to want. Those also have to be factored in, and you just need to understand what you're going to need. So you're going to put a VM, and you're going to put it in a host or a resource group, and set all this up. And when you look at everything individually, for CPUs, there's things such as different brands. Are you running Intel? Are you running AMD? Performance, how fast is it going to work? Does it have boost capabilities? if you run over, if you need more power for a certain amount of time, is it able to do that? And other features. So there's a bunch of different, so there's like burst capabilities for CPUs, and those VMs are specifically made so they'll run at a certain amount, and then if you need more, if you've acquired a certain amount of credits, as they call them, then it'll allow you to use it at a higher level for a certain amount of time. As soon as you run out of those credits, it will push it back down, or as soon as you don't need it anymore, it'll push it back down. However, during the time that you need more CPU power, it'll give you that additional boost that you need. So the higher the version that you get, the higher the performance. And that's kind of just common sense, but there are different versions that you have to pick from when you look at setting all this up. And then if you look at things like memory, you have certain storages. So how much storage, what is the storage, how much does it have, how much storage does it have, what's its performance, its latency, how many IOPS tasks can it take. Then you have things like bandwidth, how many NICs are you going to have connected to that. And then you have specialty things like GPUs and those kind of things. So there's like deep learning. And then for these, they're called optimizations. There's your general purpose, your compute, your memory, your storage, your GPU, and all those other different things that are optimized for that specific task. So if you need more memory for something, then you can have that capability to have a more memory-oriented virtual machine. Or if you need more compute, or if you just need something general purpose, then you have those capabilities. And I already talked about the burstable CPUs that allow you to go over what you pay for a certain amount of time, and I believe that goes up to 2,000% of your basic. And then there's things such as constrained options, so that you don't overpay for resources that you don't want or need. You don't always use the same CPU, so when you're allocated a CPU, that CPU could be a different CPU the next time that you allocate resources for that virtual machine. It's not guaranteed that you're always going to be using, or not even reallocated. You turn it on once, it could be using that CPU. You turn it off, and then you turn it back on again, it could be using a completely different CPU. But you do sometimes have resources that aren't like this, and they do stay the same. And Azure Resource Manager, it's great for setting these type of things up. You can make templates with it. We'll actually go into downloading templates during the lab portion of this video. And if you put a VM into a proximity placement group, also known as a PPG, it'll keep it in a low latency envelope, but make sure that whatever VM you want to use is supported by that PPG. And then there's things such as spot VMs. These are VMs that are good for non-critical tasks, such as rendering, because you are getting what you pay for. So if Azure wants to kick you out of the resource to a full paying customer, they give you like a 30-second head start before they just go ahead and kick you out and give the resources to the paying customer. The full paying customer, you still have to pay. So what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to go ahead, switch over to a different scene, and I'm going to try to pull up the Azure Portal. There we go. And then we're going to, I don't remember if it was something specific where I think it's just an option. So we're going to just go over to virtual machines. And a lot of the times you're going to want to do things with ARM templates, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to go ahead and go through the GUI, Azure Virtual Machine, and then, well, so there's 64, Azure Spot discount. So this makes things a lot cheaper, but of course, so we can just go ahead and click on this, and that should help. Yes, that does help quite a bit. So you can see that you'll have different eviction rates. This is an amazing for this example because one of them doesn't work at the moment, and two of them both have the same eviction rate of 0 to 5%, but most of the times these will be higher. You'll have a 0 to 5% option, and then you'll have like a 10 to 15% option, and depending on the eviction rate, typically depends on the price, latency, etc. So when you go to set these up, you can have these when Azure's capacity disappears, their excess capacity, because this is pretty much what it's running on, is the Azure's excess capacity that they have, or if it exceeds a specific cost that you're willing to pay. So you can set a price, and then once that price range is hit that you're willing to pay, it'll go ahead and kick you out and switch you over to that full paying customer for their resources, because there is a finite amount of resources as with anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to there we go. And you can pretty much go through the same process that we'll go through of making a normal VM to make a spot VM, and it should run the same. So now we're going to make a diagram really quick. So we'll just use this one actually. So we have a VM, whatever type that you want it to be, and then you have to give it a NIC. And a NIC is what allows it to connect to a network. So this is your NIC. This is your VM. The VM is connected to the NIC. And then you're going to have your VNet. And then within that VNet, you're going to have subnets. And then that NIC's connecting to that subnet. It's what allows your VM to connect. And we'll go through setting that up later. You can't have a VM connect to a different VM. I don't think I meant that. You can't have a VM connect to a different virtual network. You can't have it connect to a different VNet. But they can still communicate between each other. You just can't directly connect them with the NIC to two different VNets. So you put an OS onto the VM, and then you want to use a managed disk and an Azure storage account that connects the VMs to the OS. Load balancers and firewalls, sometimes you put those into the VMs. You put the firewall into the VM, and load balancers can connect to the VM. And then there's things called extensions that allow you to add some extra things. We'll go into specific examples of those later on. Typically, as I've already went over, you want to use ARM and ARM templates and not the GUI that we're going to go through for the purposes of this video. I do recommend that you watch the resiliency video, governance, and the Azure AAD video so that you understand all the concepts and how to integrate all that kind of stuff into this, because it does play a huge part in VMs. In terms of supported OS, you can pretty much use anything. You can use Windows, anything back to Server 2003, Linux, anything in the Azure Marketplace, and if there's not in the Azure Marketplace, you can just go ahead and create your own image if you'd like using the custom image builder in Azure. And then there's two different types of maintenance. You've got your planned and your unplanned. And that's not fun. Unplanned. So your planned maintenance is maintenance that's planned out. You get notified of when it's going to happen. You're ready for that to happen. Unplanned maintenance is your breakdowns in hardware that cause unexpected downtime. And there are a couple of ways that you can help defend against those unplanned maintenance and those planned maintenance that might not be during a time that you'd like or prefer, but that will tie in here in just a minute. So isolated VMs are VMs that take up everything on the host. So you're taking up a server. And you do that by purchasing the entire box in Azure. This is typically done for regulatory reasons. And this is the thing I was talking about, where you can now plan the planned maintenance. Unfortunately, you really can't do much against unplanned maintenance because it's unplanned, it's a hardware failure. Really unfortunate. Yes, that's what you can do if you have regulatory things where you need an entire box and you can't be sharing it with anything, or you need to plan out the maintenance. And then Azure is paired up with VMware, and it is a first-party tool that allows you to run VMs, so you can use your vCenter as an admin that you're used to. VM scale sets enable template configuration to be defined within scale parameters, and then scaling and over-provisioning allows you to use more or less resources as you need them. Defaultly, it'll automatically over-provision and delete whichever one loads last or doesn't load at all. This is in case one of them crashes, something happens to it, it corrupts. It'll just go ahead and use whichever one loads first. And we'll do two of these. You can set it off if you really don't want it to over provision. It doesn't really affect anything, but there's always that option. And you can set rules to provision and deprovision as needed. So if your X variable gets hit, then it'll go ahead and make more. And if it's a different X variable, if it's below that, it'll go ahead and deprovision those resources so that if you need them, don't need them, as you do and don't, it'll go ahead and do that automatically for you. And if you enable auto image updating, this is just automatically updates everything on your VM. It'll pretty much kill the VM and make a new image, update it, patch it, and the data isn't physically in the VM, so you're okay to do this. There's also instance repair. So if it doesn't respond or responds that it's unhealthy, it will just delete and reinstall the VM. And these won't delete all at the same time. Image updating will take out 20% at max and instance at 5% maximum. So there's termination notification. Will notify you if there's some kind of termination. Protection policy. It's pretty straightforward, but if you really need to, you can go ahead and look that up by yourself. So now we're going to go and kind of start creating our VM. I'm going to kind of draw this because there is a little bit of things that are just a little more complicated to do with the set tools. So you first need to understand what subscription, and then within what region, and then you're going to create 2 resource groups. Alright, I had to step away for a second, so let me catch up really quick. Yes, okay, so you need to create 2 resource groups. There we go. And one of these will be for your application or your VM, and the other one will be for your networking resources. So to start off with, you're going to want to put a VNet in the network one, and put a subnet in that. and that will use part of your VNet IP range. Now you're going to want to add an NSG, a network security group resource, and link that up to the subnet. And you can simply look up your IP address to find out what your IP is and kind of put that into your network security group. I'm going to go over all that. I'm going to actually do everything here that I'm saying. This is just kind of to give an example of how this looks in more of a schema. You'll add that as an inbound security rule. Then you'll create a storage account in the VM resource group. So over here you got you now have your storage account, and you're just trying to do this as cheap as possible because it's only used for diagnostics. And then you'll go ahead and create your VM, just your actual VM finally, and a managed disk and a NIC. And then this NIC will connect to the subnet and the public IP, because you also need one of those. Will also connect up to the NIC. So your traffic can kind of come in through this public into the NIC, connects to the VM. The VM can connect to your at the actual network. So now I believe, yes. So this is pretty much, in a very basic format, what this looks like. You've got your subscription, your region, all the resources that we discussed. So I'm going to switch scenes here really quick again, and I'm going to go back over to the Azure Portal, and let me back out of that. Alright, so back to what I started off with is, so now we're actually going to go ahead and create the VM. And we need to identify the subscription and the region. So for the subscription, we're just going to be using my basic student account. For the region, we'll go ahead and decide that once we come to something where we actually need to decide that. I believe it's going to come up pretty quick. So we're going to go ahead and look up resource groups. There's that. And I've made a couple of these in the past. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and Azure for Students, resource group. So this is going to be, that's cute. So we're going to go ahead and put this in East US then. That's now the region that we're going to use for everything. And this resource group is test VM East US. Tags, normally you'd add a tag, but for the purposes of this lab, no. There we go. And then now test VM East US, we're going to go ahead and do that process again, but now for network. There's that. Tags again. Nope. Create. There we go. Now we're going to go ahead and go into the network, because this one's the one that we're just going to set up first. I don't believe that you have to, it just makes things quite a bit easier. So now we're going to go VIR. Net. That's cute. So we need to add in a virtual network and put it in the network resource group. Virtual networks, there we go. Go ahead and create one of those. And we're going to put that inside of our network test East US VM. Name VNet test VM US East US. There we go. Perfect. IP addresses. It's for the purpose of this, we're just going to say, okay, do whatever. Security. Don't care about that. For this for the purposes of the lab, go ahead. All right, create. It's been created. Now we're going to go ahead and... Alright, that deployed successfully. That's nice. And now we're going to create a... I don't exactly know how to do this. I think it's just in the virtual network itself. Yes. That's what I figured. So we're going to go ahead and create a subnet. The name is name. Here's the ranges. NAT gateway, none. We don't need IPv6. Go ahead and save that. And now, okay, so for this next thing, you get hacked very easily if you don't do this. Like minutes. So network security groups. I'm gonna go ahead and create that. Azure for students. No. East US. Dear God, I hope I didn't put it into network security group. Link it to the subnet, so that's going to go into this one, instance detail, name, NSG net VM test, tags, same thing. Just checking it. And now we're gonna wait for this to deploy. Deployment in progress. Alright, gonna go ahead and switch over to that. And now we need to go ahead and set up a rule, because we have the network security group set up. So, yay. So, as you can see, there's nothing inbound, nothing outbound, nothing can physically get in or out right now. However, we really don't want that because we're kind of trying to connect to this VM. Makes it super inconvenient if you can't. So we can just head over to the Google. What is my IP? Public IP address. Okay. Now we're going to add that as a inbound security rule. Go ahead and see, that's not what we want. So now we want source IP address. We're going to go ahead and paste ours in. Destination, any service, 1880, TCP, I think, we can probably just leave it at that, but adding the security rule. And now we are going to add in our manage disk. So we need to make a storage account. There we go, storage account, create. So we don't need to put this in the network one because this one's actually going to be connected to the virtual machine. Azure for students, East US, storage account name. Nope, that's not it. Test VM, East US. Shoot. Test VM, East US. Alright. Storage numbers. There. We just we really don't need redundancy for this, but locally redundant, because it's just for the purposes of this, we just don't need that standard. We're just using this for general purposes. Advanced, no. We're gonna access this, so we'll just keep it at hot for now. Public access from all networks. We don't need to do anything with this because we set up the rule. Data protection, we really don't care. Encryption, we don't care. Review, go ahead and create that once it decides to get it together. There we go. And as I was talking about, here's the template thing that, so you can kind of set it up, copy paste this. Now you can keep all your resources consistent. No, I didn't want that. No. Okay. So now I'm just not gonna. That didn't happen. Yep. We're just. Yep. That doesn't matter. Just. Yep. Okay. Okay. So now that we've made the storage account, making the storage account, and we're gonna need to add storage into this because otherwise there's really nothing that we need the storage account for. Hopefully this loads sometime soon. Please. Yeah, maybe soon. I don't. Okay. Go to resource. No. Storage. Accounts. This thing. Where's... Sorry, I just don't know where everything is in this. Managed, no. Look, data storage. I don't know what it needs. I'm gonna give it a file share. Transaction optimize. We went through the optimizations already. Okay, that probably won't work, but we'll come back to it if we need it. I think we do need to fix it, but I don't know exactly what to look at right now. I'm deeply disappointed in myself. Blah, container. We're gonna go ahead and add a container, I believe. Actually, we'll just, if we need to, we'll come back to that. So, virtual machines, there we go. Now it is time to actually create the virtual machine. Resource group, we're going to want to put this in test VM East US, virtual machine name, region East US, no infrastructure redundancy required because we're doing this for a lab. Standard is okay. Once again, a lab. We're just going to do server 2019. Size, we really don't need much at all, but I don't. That one looks cheap, doesn't it? Enough. Username is A. Password is A. Confirm password A. Alright, that works. Username. We set up the role. We don't care. We don't care. Next, disks. We do not care. This is for a lab. Hard drive is fine. Encryption we don't care about. Next is networking. We have the virtual network already set up, so that doesn't matter. Management. Monitoring, advanced tags, we don't care about because this is a lab, and for the purposes of this, we just do not simply care at all. Pricing an hour. Go ahead and create. Yeah, so now we're going to, I believe, anyway. Now we're gonna go to VMs. So now we kind of have to wait for all that to work. So once that's deployed, we should be able to good to go, and we're going to put it in a resource group in the same region as the VNet. We picked the redundancy, security, image type. We didn't use Azure Spot because we really don't want to be kicked out of it right now. Username and password, inbound rules we don't care about. OS disk doesn't matter. Yeah, so you could have downloaded your ARM template that we already talked about. Okay, go to resource. Now, networking, I believe. No, I might have the DOM. IP. We need, okay. So as you can see, we can't. Yeah. Click on the IP and change the DNS name. And so then you can use the IP instead of the you can use the DNS name instead of the IP, but it's okay for this. So now I'm gonna go over to this because I have to go ahead and look up something in my host PC. Remote desktop connection. One second. So I'm gonna pause for just a second. I'll be right back. So I forgot that I had paused. So it's quite unfortunate, but so you just log in with everything through this. You just log in. You click on the computer that you want to use. It uses remote desktop, so it just automatically connects in through that. Once you're ready to delete the resource group, you just click delete resource group. And I already started this, so because I thought it was done. Put in the name, delete, and it'll delete everything, so you know that you have no loose ends. That's going to be all for this one, though. My next video will be going into application services. I believe that includes things like Azure Kubernetes, possibly. Not 100% sure. But, yeah. That's it. See you guys.